Ever feel like the resources and advice out there for women are missing something essential? I thought so too, which is why more than 6 years ago, I created She Said, She Said. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan, and after 3 decades in communications and then advocacy and now juggling motherhood and entrepreneurship, trust me, friend, I get it. Making a real impact takes more than just passion. It takes the right mindset, the right skills, the right investments, and the right community. On this show, we dive deep with incredible women from all walks of life who have been there. We uncover the secrets to building influence, navigating tricky relationships, and staying true to ourselves even when it's tough. And let's face it, it often is. I also throw in my own favorite productivity and life hacks, things that have shifted my perspective and might help you too. Wherever you are in your journey, my goal here is to leave you inspired to define success your way and to help you build the confidence you need to tackle your biggest goals. Subscribe today and let's unlock your full potential, your confidence, and your greatest influence. Hey friend, welcome back to She Said, She Said podcast. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan. I'm your host, and I am so excited for you to meet today's amazing guest. Her name is Pia Silva, and she is the co-founder of a company that has the best title. It's called Worstofall Designs, and Pia explains in this episode what that means. But let me tell you, this woman knows a thing or two about building a differentiated killer brand. She and her husband took a leap of faith and ditched freelance work in order to create a branding agency that is specifically focused on small-scale entrepreneurs and service providers. And she's helping those clients lean into what really makes their brands bold and authentic. Pia describes it as great brands without the BS. I mean, how awesome is that? Now, here's what really blew me away in this conversation. Pia has built this whole business on the idea of what she calls banked confidence. And that also happens to be the topic of her terrific TED Talk. And the concept is seriously contagious. Now, in this episode, Pia shares how she went from debt-ridden to wildly profitable by focusing on what makes her own unique value proposition so special, and by not being afraid to say no to clients who aren't the right fit. That can be so incredibly hard to do, right? Especially when you're a small business. To try not to be all things to all people, but to really find your people by niching down. Now, Pia and I also talk about how to own your pricing and why attracting your ideal clients actually means repelling those who are less than ideal and not hand-wringing after the fact about turning away potential business. Pia shares her 4 angles concept, which she uses to help clients really define their brand's personality and to attract the right clients for them. Oh, and get this, Pia has an incredible free gift just for you, a free audio version of her book, Badass Your Brand, and she's included a link where you can download that, again, for free. So be sure to stick around until the end of our conversation to find out how to snag that. And don't forget to follow Pia on Instagram. You'll find her at Pia Loves Your Biz. And while you're at it, if you aren't currently following me on social, I would love it if you would join me over there because I share a lot of additional content that's related to the topics that we talk about here on She Said, She Said podcast. So I think you'll enjoy it. You'll find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Laura Cox Kaplan. Now, trust me, friend, this episode today, episode 311, is jam-packed with actionable advice and with inspiring perspective that will leave you feeling really fired up and ready to take your business and your personal brand to the next level. So let's dive in. Here is episode 311 with Pia Silva. Enjoy. Pia, welcome to She Said, She Said.
Thank you so much, Laura. Great to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you, and I'm happy to get to know you. I have loved digging into your story. You have a very interesting background. Let's start by talking about your business, which is called Worstofall Design, and how and why you created it.
Yeah, well, it was pretty serendipitous, actually. It came about very organically. Almost 15 years ago at this point, my husband and I were engaged at that point. He was a freelance designer, and I was doing gig work before that was a term. And at one point I said, you know what, you're very talented, you're very creative. You're not great at managing the projects or the money. And I like those things. Why don't I go find us clients? And that's really how the whole thing started. His name, my married name is Worstofall. So Worstofall Design was always kind of this nickname of his. And so that was the business name I inherited, and it ended up being super authentic to what we wanted to build.
I love that. Let's talk a bit about what kind of business this is, because this really goes to the heart of what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, well, so we started because he was freelance designing, and I was just looking for freelance clients. But over those first few years, the only way I knew to get clients was to network. And through networking, I learned really on the job what was working and what wasn't. So I did so many things in those first few years just based on what other people selling similar services were doing. And I learned on the job how important it was to differentiate. So over those first few years, I really leaned into building our brand. You know, we became Worstofall Design, badass brands without the BS. And it was a really, especially in 2013, was a really irreverent, contrarian way of showing up and talking. And I say that because now I don't think it rings as irreverently as it did 10 years ago. But when I used to show up at events and say, badass brands without the BS, I mean, people would literally say, I don't know if you can say that.
Right.
Yeah. So it really made us stand out, and you know, it had a very, what I now teach people too, is it had a very push-pull effect. Some people were just loved everything about it. They could understand what we were doing immediately. They said, Worstofall Design, that's so clever. And some people said, why would you want to be Worstofall Design? And what are you saying? And I would just say, you know what, you're just not our clients. It's totally cool. Yeah. And that's really what badass brands are all about.
Yeah, I love that. And I want you to dig into why what you just said matters so much, because that's really at the heart of, it's at the heart of your business. It's at the heart of your podcast. It's at the heart of the book that you have released, which is called Badass Your Brand. So again, a play on those words. But talk about why that particular concept is really the through line through all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I define badass brands as having two critical characteristics. One is that they repel as much as they attract.
So interesting.
They have a really strong personality. And two is that they are able to charge more than the competition and still win the business. So those are the kinds of clients I've always wanted to work with, and those are the kinds of branding agencies I now train on how to help clients stand out in a crowded marketplace and charge more. Because when you demonstrate that kind of value, when you put yourself in a category of one, and there really isn't any direct competition, then not only are you able to charge more, but you need to charge more because you need to demonstrate that value is there, and price does communicate value.
Yeah. For a lot of people listening, that's going to seem really counterintuitive. That if she can't serve, as many clients as possible and flood the marketplace, she's not going to be successful. So can we talk about why this counterintuitive approach works and how it worked in your particular business? Because you and your partner went from being $40,000 in debt to not just earning a profit, but having many multiples of that of that number profit. So let's talk about why does this work? Why should people not be afraid of really niching down and of repelling certain customers that would be in that bigger marketplace potentially?
Yeah. So really quickly, this is a core turning point in my story, was that we were doing our agency kind of the traditional, I call it the default agency model way, and it did land us in debt. And the switch that we made was we had been chasing larger and larger projects for larger and larger price points. We were pitching at the time like $30,000 projects. They were old school projects, so they would take us 6-9 months to deliver on. And I was having a really hard time closing. I was writing a lot of proposals. People seemed to like us. They said they wanted to work with us, but they wouldn't follow through, or they would ghost us. And I know people who any services that you're delivering, I know you know what being ghosted by a proposal feels like. And so when we got in the debt, we were kind of backed into a corner, and we had to make some really big decisions that were very gut-wrenching, one of which was to let go of our 2 employees. And we had to kind of rethink everything. And what we realized at that moment was that this other small offering that we had been delivering to, like really on the side, undercover, to people who couldn't afford us, was this $3,000 one-day intensive. And we had done a few of them over the year, and we said, you know what, we really like those. And then we started looking at the profitability of the 2 offers, and we realized, oh my goodness, this $3,000 one-day intensive is so much more profitable than the $30,000 6-month project. Wow. And actually, if we did 10 $3,000 one days, we would make $30,000 in 10 days of our time. Whereas I promise you, those $30,000 projects, if you count it all up, probably were taking us 3 times as long, like 30 plus days to deliver. So that was one thing. We went all in on that, and that changed the tides for us, because at the time especially, nobody was doing anything that intensively. Plus, we had this really irreverent contrarian brand. So between this like unique offering and this you love us or you hate us, right? You want what we've got or not. It was like I had been swimming upstream, and then it all just came. It all just like took me away, because people were. First of all, it was really easy to say yes. We had a really clear process. Every client that we did became a referral for other clients. So the more projects we did, the more projects we were getting. Yeah. The clarity was there. And when we talk about, the fear of turning people away, I was turning anyone away who wasn't willing to do it exactly the way that we did it. So I'm turning you away, but if I wasn't so contrarian, if I wasn't willing to say Worstofall Design at networking events, right, then I would really sound like literally everyone else that I encountered, which is, we create standout designs and we'll help you stand out. And, I always like to say, if you have to tell people you'll help them stand out, you're really not going to be that great at it, because you're saying what everyone else is saying. So that was part of it. And then also just, I know that a lot of people struggle with saying no to work that comes to them. Oh, but I only want this, or right. I need this, or I don't want to work in a one-day intensive. And the fact that I was willing to say, like, no problem, you're just not our client. There are like thousands of people who will do that work for you. Yeah. I'm not the person. It simplified my life so much. And it actually, I found unintentionally, like, reaffirmed my authority to these people, because the people that I would turn away, you better believe they would come back later and say, I thought about it and I need what you have. I really want it now. Or they would just tell their friends, I wasn't a fit, but this is exactly what you need. So it was actually a marketing tactic. I didn't know it at the time, but it worked incredibly well.
Yeah. Okay. That is so incredibly fascinating. Maybe talk for a moment about what types of businesses are your ideal client? Not just the particular need that you've described, but what kinds of businesses are really benefit the most from this? Because as I understand it, you work a lot with either solo entrepreneurs, or you work with folks that have, really small teams, but maybe talk a little bit about who this works particularly well for.
Yeah. So our process of delivering, now we deliver entire brands in a 1 to 3 day intensive. Most of our clients are a $40,000 two-day intensive. That includes, there's a little more to it, right? But that includes the entire brand strategy, the messaging, the copy, the website, the design of the brand, the design and build of the website, collateral. So it's a full package. We just deliver it in this two-day intensive. And we started with that two-day intensive at like $5,000, and now it's $40,000. And it has always been for 1 to 3 person service businesses.
Wow.
So that's our niche. I know that people in our industry think that solopreneurs or 2-person businesses can't afford such prices. In fact, I do encounter a lot of people who say, I want to charge higher prices, so I have to go after bigger businesses. And I just haven't found that to be the case at all. I have had solo businesses pay every price point. I just had a 1-person business with 2 employees do a $60,000 brand up with us a couple weeks ago, because they want the authority and the conviction and the knowledge that we have, and they understand that they're not paying for design; they're paying for, an entire brand and strategy with the design and execution included. So, yep, this works really well for small businesses. Any business that has, I always said 1 to 3 people, it means 1 to 3 decision makers, really. So as long as there's not that many more people involved, the process works great.
Yeah, so interesting. So, all of this, to me, begs a couple of questions. I mean, one is, challenges that women have in starting businesses. Women are leaving the workforce in droves right now, looking for more balance, more autonomy, more flexibility, all of those things, right? And coming out of COVID in particular, and sort of getting back into the workforce and making it all work has been more difficult, I think, for an awful lot of people. But these women leave, they start businesses. Like, asking for what they're worth has always been a bit of a challenge, especially for women, for a host of reasons. Let's talk about how we reconcile that based on what you've just said, where you're charging a much higher rate for the particular product that you are delivering. Let's talk a little bit about sort of the psychology and sort of how you help female clients get over that hurdle.
Yeah, absolutely. So, pricing confidence is really what we're talking about here. I do think there is a lot of language out there about you need to charge what you're worth, you need to increase your prices, and I'm all for that. Don't get me wrong. So I'll preface this by saying, of course, I want people to charge what they're worth. And I think that there is a disconnect between the inherent value of a project or a deliverable and the value of the perceived value that the client is going to get. And they're not necessarily aligned, especially in the beginning. So let me tell you what I mean by that. Even if you can deliver a really valuable strategy, website, whatever it is, if you don't have conviction in your process, in the way that you lead the client through the process, the client will actually not get as much value out of it. If you present work, for example, the way that I know most people do, which is, well, here's some stuff. What do you think? Give me your feedback. Let's make revisions. What you're doing is you're telling the client, you lead the way. I've made some stuff, but I really need you to tell me what you like, and do you want me to change it? And all of these things actually, I have found, make it much harder for clients to feel really confident in their decisions. But the more confidence that I can give them, that the decisions that I have made for them are the best decisions, the more value that they get out of it, because they leave going, this is the best version of what this could be, and I'm not concerned that it's not. So a lot of that comes from, obviously, experience and practice. And so going back to pricing confidence, I think the way to build that pricing confidence is actually to build up your prices and do it very quickly. So I started with $3,000 one day brand ups. I did a bunch of them before I realized I could be charging more for this. And then I started increasing the price. I had done so many when I made the price $4,000. And then I sold a couple and I said, I'm gonna make it $5,000. And then I sold a couple, and for a stretch there, I was just raising it $1,000 every month. I'd sell a couple, raise it $1,000, sell a couple. So literally a year later, my one-day brand up was $10,000 from $3,000. But I built that confidence just by doing it and getting the world to like kind of validate that price point. Yep, it's worth that price point. People have paid $4,000. Now people have paid $5,000. So that's always my advice for getting your prices up. It's just sell, raise, sell, raise. Build the confidence with like true data in the world. If people will pay $5,000, they'll pay $6,000. Don't triple your price because I'm only charging $5,000, but this is really worth $15,000. So I'm going to start charging $15,000 before you've built the stomach for that price point. Because here's what happens. You jump the price up. I've seen this happen many times. You jump the price up and then you tell somebody and then they go, oh, that's too much. And then what do? You go, oh my gosh, is that too much? And then you start to go, should I lower it? Okay, maybe I'll try it. You second guess yourself. What is this doing to your confidence? Right? This is doing terrible things. Right? You're going to lower it now. You're going to play with all these games. So instead, I think that there's a really strong foundation that's built by sell, raise, kind of incrementally, but often that you can't get away from.
Yeah. I'm thinking in my mind about what happens when the client says no, right? And for a lot of us, when we're rejected, it can be hard to get back in there and go back at it without, to your earlier point, second guessing ourselves. Okay, well, maybe my price is too high. And how do you know? Like, how do you know how to set it, and how do you get past that? Did that ding to your confidence potentially when you are rejected?
Well, I actually think the ding feels completely different if let's say you've sold. I just had a student of mine say she sold her third $10,000 package, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that even just 3 or 4 months ago, she said, I don't think I can charge that much. But she had been selling this package at $8,500, and I said, many people have bought it at $8,500. Why don't you make it $9,000 and sell it? So she did. She sold it at $9,000. I said, well, there's no difference between $8,500 and $9,000, and there's no difference between $9,000 and $10,000. Frankly, like somebody is going to pay $9,000, they're not going to say, oh, but $10,000 I won't. So because you've built that confidence, if somebody says $10,000 is too high, you can feel confident thinking, okay, you're just not my client, not it's too high. I know it's not too high because I've sold it to many people at or just below this price point. So I think for me, at least, that's been my experience, is building that like real world validation of the price makes you less shakeable.
Yeah, that's really well said. Let's get into some of the other meat of the book. I wanted to ask you about one of the things that you talk about are mind-bending questions for helping your potential sort of really dial in on what your service is and how to think about this. Maybe describe what that means and how you use those mind-bending questions as
to help people
tool.
brand their businesses, you mean? Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite questions to ask people is, what do you stand against? What do you hate about your industry? Like, if you could change something about the industry that you're in, what would it be? And I find that it is, most people in the branding world will ask you, what do you stand for? Let's take a stand. You got to talk about what's so important to you. And I think that gets really weak answers, actually. I think people say, I stand for honesty, I stand for integrity, I stand for humanity. It's like, well, who doesn't stand for those things? Right. But when you ask people, what are you against? What do you hate? You get a totally different perspective, and you actually get quite a fire out of people. And that, I find, is really valuable stuff to figure out either what you stand for or how you can craft a brand that is kind of anti that and pro this other thing. Yeah, I love that. There's also something that you talk about, I think it's called, it has four angles.
Like the four-pronged.
Yeah.
The 4 angles, that's what it was. Talk a little bit about that as well.
Because I worked specifically with small service businesses, I found that there were, I kind of developed this 4 angles concept because I found that a lot of people thought that brand was basically mostly had to do with you have to pick a very specific niche, and then it was your voice or personality. And those are both valuable, but I found that there were actually 4 quadrants of things that can help differentiate you and helped differentiate me. And so in my book, I say, basically you need at least 2 of these. Like if you have 3, great. If you have 4, amazing, but you gotta have at least 2. So here are the 4 angles. The first one is you've gotta have a specific target market. I don't think it has to be industry specific though. And I think a lot of people, when they think about niching, they get tripped up thinking that they have to only work with chiropractors or something. But I don't think you have to do that. I think it actually has to be a combination of maybe it's in a space, but maybe it's a kind of person, maybe it's a size of business, maybe it's a couple of these. I work with 1 to 3 person service businesses. That's actually pretty broad. So you don't necessarily only have to have this. Remember, you need 2 out of the 4. So that's 1. 2 is your personality. It counts if your personality is contrary to the prevailing personality in your industry. It doesn't mean that you have to be any which way. It just has to be differentiated enough from your industry, again, for it to count according to my 4 angles method. The third one is having a really clear and specific sales process. So our sales process is that we have a fit call with our clients, and if they're a fit, we sell them our brand shrink. I call it a lead product. So we sell them this first engagement. It's like a no-brainer price. It's an interview where we deliver a brief at the end, and we basically give them a plan. And that cuts out all the free proposals. It cuts out all the back and forth of trying to figure out if you're, what the person needs and giving them quotes. It just gets rid of all of that. You get paid for this process. It's a very specific process. It builds a lot of authority for you with the client, and it gives the client an experience of what it's like to work with you, which, by the way, makes it much easier for them to hire you to much higher price services. Yeah. And then the last thing is actually having these like a process, a tried and true process framework, whatever you want to call it, that you own. So there is a methodology to how you work with people, and they're not just buying off of a list. So those are the 4 angles. If you have at least 2 of them, then you're considered having a badass brand. You can have 2 of them, and then the other 2 are just kind of, right? Like maybe your personality is not that contrarian. That's okay. It doesn't mean you don't have a personality. It just means it doesn't count as one of the 4. But I found that giving people this really kind of clear-cut way to assess their brand makes it really helpful, because I think people are really confused about what makes a brand work or not.
Yeah. Do you think that same methodology applies when we're talking about personal branding as well as branding for business?
You can apply some of it. You can apply it to your personal brand, but certainly in personal branding, your personality is the most important piece. So I don't think you get to choose with that one. Like your personality has to be, and it's not that it has to be contrary to other personal brands. It just has to be, in my opinion, like really strong or what's the word? Like concentrated. I like to tell people their personal brand. Imagine it's like one piece of you that you pull out and then like blow up on a billboard. That's your personal brand, right? It's not everything about you, but it's like this one piece of you extreme, so that you can be known for that.
Really authentic to you, but it is sort of extrapolated in a or maybe magnified in a significant way. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. Is there any kind of small entrepreneur that your approach doesn't work so well for? I mean, this is really service focused, but any particular kind of sector that it maybe doesn't work as well for?
I mean, I've applied these principles to lawyers, financial planners, certainly coaches, people in the health and wellness space. I think it is hard for anyone to have a business if they're not willing to be seen. If they're a small business and they don't want to be seen. So I guess that's who I don't think that all businesses have to be, like the founder has to be forward facing necessarily. But if you're trying to build a one-person business, a three-person business, until you grow to a certain size, you have to be the person who is, leading the charge. And in services, they're hiring your business because of you. So I think it is hard for any business to be successful if they're not willing to put themselves out there.
Yeah. Let's pivot for just a second, because I did want to touch on something that you've been talking about on your terrific podcast over the last several episodes. It's focused on setting boundaries, and this is relevant no matter what it is that you do. You have to have the ability to have boundaries and to honor them. So I'd love for you to share a little bit of advice that you share with clients on this topic.
Yeah, well, boundaries, I think, are part of what make a client's experience really good, actually. So I think that a lot of us, probably especially women maybe, we struggle to have really clear boundaries because a lot of us also have kind of people-pleasing tendencies, and we think that boundaries mean that we are going to be disliked, or clients are going to, or not clients, anybody is going to think ill of us, or that we're not a nice person or something. But what I have found over the years writing about this, teaching about this, and doing this myself is that actually clear boundaries make it easier for you to interact with someone and for them to trust you. And sometimes when people express boundaries and it offends somebody, or somebody takes it, makes it something about your personality, it's usually just because you're not usually expressing those boundaries. So it comes out of left field. And they might be surprised. And so that's why it feels like a disconnect. But especially when working with clients and, as a service, one of the best things you can do is be super communicative from the moment you interact with them through the entire process of exactly how things are going to go, exactly what they can expect, and then not deviate from it. So one thing I always tell my clients is, if you are working with somebody, even if I know you want to answer that email at 8 o'clock at night or on Saturday morning because you have the answer and a client asked you and you want to over deliver, it's actually not doing either of you any good for you to answer on a weekend. What you're doing is you're messing with your boundaries of, I work with you during the week, during work hours, but you're also setting an expectation that can't possibly be met. So you're and then you're confusing them, because if you get an email from someone that you've hired on Saturday morning, well, maybe next time I email you, I should also get it on Saturday morning. And if I don't get it, well, now I'm waiting. So it's very important to maintain those boundaries so that the client has a really good experience working with you.
Yeah, and that I hear you saying that that consistency matters so much. Like, it's really a matter of setting boundaries and being consistent with those boundaries, and that way you have very clear expectations. You do, and so does the client. That is really, really smart way of thinking about that. Okay, Pia, where can folks find you if they're looking to work with someone
Well,
like
you can find me on Instagram. I am at Pia Loves Your Biz. That's it. B-I-Z.
Brilliant.
I do. I truly do. And I thought I brought a little gift for your listeners if you'd like.
Fantastic.
I recently put my book, Badass Your Brand, on audio. And since if you're listening to this, you must like audio. I thought I would gift you guys, you can always buy it on Audible, but I thought you'd gift you guys the audio version. It's a private feed.
Amazing.
So I put it at nobsagencies.com/she said.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. What a lovely, lovely gesture. And right here at the holidays, this is
Thank you.
Perfect. Anything that I have not asked you about, or anything else that you want to make sure that listeners know about before I let you
thanks,
go?
Laura, but
Well, you can always come back. I've had so much fun with you today.
I appreciate it so much. Yeah, we've scratched the surface on so many things. It's been delightful to talk to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Oh, my pleasure. Great to have you. All right, that's a wrap on episode 311 with the fabulous Pia Silva. I don't know about you, but I loved what she had to say about niching down and really owning your unique brilliance as a way of finding that ideal client, the one who will pay you more and who really wants to work with you. That is such great advice. And speaking of great advice, don't forget to grab your free gift from Pia. It's an audio copy of her book, Badass Your Brand, which you will find as a link in the show notes for this episode, episode 311. So be sure to check that out. Friend, thanks again so much for listening. If you have feedback from me about this or any of our She Said podcast episodes, I would love to hear that as well. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Facebook at Laura Cox Kaplan. And if you found particular value in this conversation, I would love a quick review from you. Those reviews help us to craft the kind of content that meets you right where you are in your journey. So be sure to send that along to me as well. In the meantime, thanks again for listening. And remember, She Said podcast is a weekly production of She Said Media.